Well, welcome to the 700 Club. On this day, 1 year ago, Israelis woke to the sound of sirens. Iranian-backed terrorists from Gaza were attacking Israeli communities. They killed more than 1,100 people, and they took more than 250 hostages. It was the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Now Israel is in a multi-front war, not only against Iran's proxy armies, but against Iran itself. As the fighting continues, the nation is remembering the victims of October 7th. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports.
At 6:29 Monday morning, the moment terrorists from Gaza breached the fence into Israel 1 year ago, President Isaac Herzog observed a moment of silence at the site of the Nova Music Festival, where hundreds gathered in memory of those killed and kidnapped.
7th of October 2023, a day that should be remembered in infamy. This is a scar on humanity. This is a scar on the face of the earth.
It's one of many observances happening throughout the country to remember the October 7th attacks, including an event by the government press office, the National Documentation Project, which is collecting stories of those who suffered that day.
All of mankind, we have to remember what has happened on October 7th. We have to remember the atrocities. We have to remember the people who are still being held hostage in Gaza.
On hand were family members of the murdered, as well as relatives of the hostages still held, and some who've been released.
Each story is unique, but together they create the full picture of captivity, a sad picture.
Shai Zohar is the uncle of Omer Nutra, a dual Israeli-American citizen and tank commander who was kidnapped as he responded to the attacks.
Omer was taken alive out of that burning tank that you've seen on the morning of October 7th. Ever since, we have not heard a thing about Omer.
Zohar is leading a Jewish prayer effort in Tel Aviv, crying out for the return of the hostages.
The world needs to make a unified stand against Hamas and saying they need to come back. Period. It's been a year, and whatever it is that needs to be dealt with will be dealt with after the hostages release.
This weekend, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is fighting a war on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization, including Iran, which launched more than 200 ballistic missiles at Israel last week. He criticized France's president and others who want to block the sale of weapons to Israel.
President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at Israel as the IDF carries out surgical strikes in Beirut. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, let us remember 39 Americans were killed a year ago. This is our part of this struggle. And there are American hostages still in tunnels in Gaza. It's incredible to me that you could see protests on American college campuses supporting their capture, supporting Hamas. It makes no sense to me that any government would support, any political group would support what Hamas did. And when you turn to Lebanon and what Hezbollah is doing, where they're firing rockets at civilian targets, it makes no sense that the world isn't standing with Israel to say, never again. We all vowed after the Holocaust, we would never see this again. And here it is. Now is our generation's turn, and we need to stand against anti-Semitism. We need to stand for Israel. 100 years ago, it was established in international law by the League of Nations that Israel, the Jewish people, had a right of self-determination in their ancestral homeland. That's why it was called the British Mandate. That came into being in 1948. The UN recognized the state of Israel. The only people who didn't were the Arab nations surrounding her. They declared war. Now, over the decades since that, Egypt has come to peace with Israel. Jordan has come to peace with Israel. The entire region needs to come to peace with Israel and say, yes, indeed, international law is correct. You do have the right of self-determination. You do have a right to live in your ancestral homeland of Israel. Let us forever stand with Israel. CBN News will live stream the National Remembrance Ceremony from Israel. That's today, live, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch it on the CBN News YouTube channel or on the CBN News app. We want to remember, and you can be a part of that at 1 p.m. today. Well, one of the communities that suffered the most on October 7th was a kibbutz named Kfar Aza. Our CBN Israel news team made the trip to the village near the Gaza border. Kfar Aza really means Gaza. They walked the streets, heard the accounts of one of the worst attacks on that terrible day. Chris Mitchell brings us the story.
Some of you have already seen it with your own eyes, and for some it's the first time. And I think that being here and seeing it with your own eyes, and I tell this to every person that comes here, is extremely important. I think that watching it through the screen, seeing photos and videos, hearing about it, is not quite the same as seeing it with your own eyes.
IDF Reserve Captain Maya Bentwich gave CBN News a first-hand tour of Kfar Aza, one of the 22 kibbutzim attacked by Hamas on October 7th. Of the 950 residents, Hamas murdered 63, kidnapped 18, in all 10% of the people.
I'm going to try and take you back to October 7th, 6:30 a.m., where we have 15 minutes non-stop ongoing alarms that were alarming even for the people who lived here and were used to living under fire. Less than 30 minutes later, we have hundreds of terrorists infiltrating this very kibbutz. The estimation is 300 to 400. They come in by air with gliders, Buckeyes, by land with pickup trucks. Most of them had machine guns glued on them, set on automatic, and with motorbikes. And unfortunately come in very well prepared, and they just start shooting, rampaging, screaming and yelling in Arabic. They come in with guns, RPGs, grenades, bombs, and they just start shooting. And people are hiding inside their mamads. And this is what's going on. This is before 7 a.m. Now, we're going to be talking later about what a mamad is, but a mamad is supposed to be protecting you from bombs, from missiles, not from terrorists. And this is the reality of October 7th.
We walked along what has become called the Street of Death.
It's not just bodies. You would have dismantled bodies, bodies that were beheaded, that were raped, sexually assaulted, set on fire. Yeah. So this man and this dog survived October 7th, and she stayed silent, and they're now back here.
We met Raphael on the way.
So how did you survive?
A lot of prayers, and it's not something logic I can explain, because it's not. I can tell you that 10 meters away from me, people being killed and their house being burned. So I have no logic explained to say why I'm alive and they are not. It is what it is.
Bentwich says as time goes by, the story is in danger of being drowned out.
One thing is to remember the people, to tell the stories because there are so many, but another is to keep on giving context. We're not in a state of trauma. Oh, this happened to us. We need to keep telling this to the world. No, this is not the situation. The situation is that something that should concern humanity, not just our nation, not just our people, not just the Jews. Something happened here on a humanitarian level that should concern the world. And the world is stating a lot of opinions as to what's going on around us. And I get that. But you still need the context, and this is the context. Because, like I said, on October 6th, there was a ceasefire. And on October 7th, Hamas chose to break it.
Bentwich took us to a different neighborhood.
And if you'd ask the residents of the kibbutz, they'll tell you it was the most beautiful neighborhood. Almost every single person that lived here and was here on the 7th was either murdered or kidnapped, especially from the strip we're just walking. And 4 out of the 5 that are still being held hostage from this kibbutz, from Kfar Aza, 4 of them are from here, from this strip. You'll see their names and faces. When you see the red writing on the signs, it means they were murdered. And when you see the yellow writing, it means they were kidnapped.
With Gaza in the background, Bentwich talked about the second wave on October 7th.
They were wearing regular clothes. They were not wearing the Nukhba forces uniforms. And they loot. But not only do they loot, They did a lot of the atrocious act. They did the murdering, the raping, the sexual assault, the kidnapping. A lot of it was done by them. And then they go back. But the message you still see outside these apartments was not done by us. Most of it was not done by the terrorists. It was done by those who came to loot, by those Gazans.
Many of the people in Kfar Aza believed in peace.
We're talking about people that would go at least once a week to the Gazan border to pick up sick kids and women who had cancer, drive them to hospitals in the center of Israel so that they could get proper medical treatment. With their own cars, they didn't get paid for it. They did it out of the kindness of their hearts and out of the need to build a better future because they believed in peace.
We talked with Bentwich about her calling.
Well, I'm honored to be doing this because I think it's important for people to see it, and that as time goes by, it gets harder to see it and to understand, and especially what the world is getting, so we need to get it out there. Every person that comes here, I tell them when they finish here, and I'm going to say the same thing to you, that you're now ambassadors. You're not just a part of our heartbeat, you're now ambassadors, because seeing it with your own eyes is different.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is here with us now in our Virginia Beach studio. And so, Chris, you're now an ambassador of what you saw. What has been the impact on Israel?
Well, hard to describe. There was a front page in the Jerusalem Post this morning with just the banner, October 7th, 2023. And he said, 1 year later, words still fail to capture what happened on that day. People are still reeling, still traumatized, still mourning, still grieving. Many of the hostages are still not recovered or their bodies. We've talked about Israel being a family. And almost everybody was affected by October 7th. They knew somebody that was kidnapped or murdered or that was called up into reserves almost immediately. Everybody in Israel has been affected by it, including ourselves. One of the things, by going to Kfar Aza, you see for yourself exactly what happened. And Maya says it very eloquently. As an ambassador, you've seen what happened. One other thing that happened just a few weeks after October 7th is the government press office made available to all the journalists 47 minutes of raw footage of what happened on October 7th, mainly from Hamas videos or the victims or circuit, closed circuit.
They broadcasted live.
They did.
They were proud of what they were doing.
After I saw that, Gordon, I really said to myself, I was coming back from Jerusalem after watching this, and I really felt the Lord said to me, honor them, because so many of these people were desecrated, humiliated, butchered, literally the bodies cut up, and just to honor them. And as it was said about our generation, as you said in your commentary, it's like our Dietrich Bonhoeffer moment for this generation. Will we stand with the Jewish people? Will we stand with the state of Israel during the darkest crisis since the Holocaust? And Gordon, you've been great. Amazing commentary for a whole year.
Well, I went to Kfar Aza. I was there in March, and you're shooting a documentary, and we said, let's stop down, let's go visit. And I was in one of those houses, and the brother of one of the victims was with me, giving me the tour. And here he is, right next to the couch where his sister was murdered, and telling her story. And it's something I'll carry the rest of my life. I'm looking at the bloodstained couch, hearing her story from her brother, and then his resolve to go forward. And there's a wonderful Jewish phrase, may her memory be a blessing. Yeah. And may the memory of everyone who lost their lives on this horrible day, may their memory be a blessing, and may it give us resolve that, yes, indeed, we have to stand against this evil. The face of evil was revealed a year ago. I mean, it's pure evil. You look at Hamas, it's an Islamic death cult. And again, I can't understand anyone saying we support that. How in the world can you support that? And just the atrocities of it. So how is the Israeli public doing right now? Before October 7th, they were deeply divided. They couldn't come to a government. They had multiple elections, and it just seemed to be they were tearing themselves apart. In the current war, how has that changed?
Well, I think after October 7th, I mean, what had been happening on October 6th changed dramatically. And then you saw such a unity standing around the Jewish state. You had reservists coming in. There were some reservists that came back, and their units, it wasn't 100% return. It was like 150% return, where people wanted to stand with Israel and their family. People need to realize that the battle that Israel's facing, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, is like a few hours away from their home. So they're not fighting necessarily for something far away. They're standing in for their families. And, what you saw in Kfar Aza and what people describe and what I saw in that video, it really speaks to the fact that this is not just a physical war, but it's really a spiritual battle as well. And I think since October 7th, one thing that has happened has been people praying for Israel, I think, like never before, and they're standing with the Jewish people.
What do you make of the current internet? I mean, whether you're talking about the UN, this just seemed to be constantly spouting anti-Israel resolutions. I mean, it just seems to be a continual stream. Yeah. And the latest for France to say the countries of the world need to withhold weapons from Israel. For me, it's mind-boggling that they would take that position. What do you think is going to turn the tide in the international community?
I don't know that, but a lot of people think it is mind-boggling, myself included. And I think France needs to understand, the U.S. needs to understand, it's not just Israel's battle. They are on the front line, and this is something we've heard for the past year, Gordon. It's not just Israel's battle. This is a battle against radical Islam. This is a battle against forces that want to destroy Western civilization, that want to destroy France, that want to destroy us here. We are the great Satan, as it said, and Israel's the little Satan. But why keep weapons away or diplomatic support away from Israel when it's fighting for its very existence and fighting on behalf of Western civilization is mind-boggling.
Well, I'll point out the crazy just because I feel compelled to point out the crazy. In the Trump administration, all funding for UNRWA was cut off. And the basis of that was it was quite clear that they were supporting Hamas and they were supporting the rocket attacks against Israel. At the same time, the Taylor Force Act came into being, and you couldn't support the Palestinian Authority with their martyr payments, their shaheed payments, where literally you earn a pension by killing Jews. The Houthis in Yemen were designated as a terrorist organization. Well, here we are in a new administration, and in the first week, they restore funding to UNRWA. UNRWA employees were part of the attack on October 7th. The Houthis are firing on our own naval vessel, and our own State Department won't designate them a terrorist organization. There's been reports that our support of the Lebanese army has somehow gotten to Hezbollah. All of these things just, again, boggle the mind, and you go, when in the world, forget the international community, can we have our own State Department and our own administration wake up and see it for what it really is?
Yeah.
What do you predict will happen in the coming year?
Well, I think Israel has a choice right now, and after being attacked by Iran twice on October 13th and just a few days ago, and I happened to last Tuesday night be in a bomb shelter along with maybe 10 million other Israelis.
There when the missiles were incoming.
Yeah, they came. Miraculously, nobody was hurt and very little damage, and that just speaks to the prayer movement and God protecting Israel, like it says in Psalm 120. I think Israel, and I feel that's where they're going, is they're going to make a decision to have a victory. They've been fighting Hezbollah or Hamas for years, but never on the way to actually making a victory. And I think they're planning, well, they're almost there in Gaza against Hamas. And it feels like they will go against Hezbollah, at least to have a security zone, a buffer zone from the Israeli-Lebanese border to the Litani River, like they had many, many years ago.
Which the UN was supposed to enforce.
Exactly.
And they haven't.
They haven't. And then the big goal is what to do with Iran. And I think that's a bit mind-boggling too, because they're asking for proportional retaliation by Israel after they've been attacked twice. So I think there's going to be something that they will do with Iran, whether it's the oil or the nuclear or even against the leadership, remains to be seen.
Well, just think proportionally, if Iran launched 180 ballistic missiles against Europe, what would Europe's response be? If they launch it against us here in the U.S., well, what would our response be? Our response should be, let's stand with Israel. Our response, let's pray for Israel. Let's pray for total victory. And I'll echo what Netanyahu has said for a long time. This war could end if Hamas would unconditionally surrender, lay down their weapons, release all the hostages. This war can end. The pressure should be put on Hamas and not on Israel. Well, Chris, thanks for your eyewitness account, and thanks for joining with us.
Great to be with you, Gordon.